Thank you for tuning in to the Into the Classroom series produced by Mental Health California, sponsored by Blue Shield of California's Blue Sky Initiative. Hello, I want to welcome you to this webinar tonight. It's a part of our Into the Classroom series, and that series is being brought to you by Blue Shield of California's Blue Sky Initiative. My name is Michael P. Coleman. I'm your host today, and we've got a fantastic organization that we're going to highlight. It's called Coffee and Conversation, and from the very beginning, I love that title, and I know you do too. I know you're going to love getting to meet three of the people that are behind Coffee and Conversation, and we'll spend a little time talking about what they do, why they do it, and why you need to know all about it. First up, I'm going to introduce you to Patrice Tevis. Patrice, how are you doing today?
Hi, I'm fine.
It's really good to see you. I love your hair, Patrice, if I could say that.
Thank you.
Thanks for being with us today. I'm going to introduce you to a couple of your colleagues, rather. We've got Kiana Rowe. Kiana, how are you today?
Hello, I'm well. Thank you, Michael.
Really good to see you as well. And Maurice Geddes is also joining us. How you doing, Maurice?
Outstanding.
It's really good to have you. I can feel the energy in the room already. So let's communicate some of that energy to everybody and talk about this incredible service that the three of you and others are providing. I've got a first question for you, Patrice, before we get into details of the program. Your bio on your website says that you see yourself rather as a voice for the underserved. And I really loved that. So I want you to talk about that a little bit. Can you talk about being a voice of the underserved as it relates to your work with Coffee and Conversation?
Yes. Well, life's experiences have taught me that we only have the power we do. Everybody is not equipped to advocate for themselves in the same way as others. And there are a lot of people who are struggling, who are suffering, and they don't have the voice or the capacity to get their needs met. And even for all of my life, as a young woman, I've always kind of been the voice of the underserved. Like I just always cared about people who didn't have the capacity to step up and speak for themselves and get their needs met.
And when you say for the whole of your life, but did you feel that even as a young person? We're talking to people of all different ages. So I'm just wondering how early in your life you picked up on that being a part of your mission or your call.
Probably like around 14, 15.
Wow, that's so impressive, so impressive. You've got something in common, Patrice, with two of your colleagues here, Maurice and Kiana. The three of you have backgrounds in law enforcement, and I'm really fascinated by that. I'm wondering if you could talk about that. Maybe it relates to what you just talked about. And then, Patrice, I'm wondering if that's a part of the recruitment for staff for your team. Did you look for people that had backgrounds in law enforcement?
Actually, no, not really. My law enforcement background had a lot to do with me becoming a therapist. And then I actually I worked with Maurice for years. And we are now both retired from law enforcement. But correctional law enforcement is where I started, in the institutions, and then in the streets of Oakland, and then in the streets of Sacramento as a parole agent and a supervisor. And we were arresting people who needed services, social services, mental health services. They need to talk to somebody. And we didn't have any other tools but to give them a card and take them to jail a lot of times. And that's kind of what made me think, maybe we got this backwards. And in my retirement now, I can reach out to people and provide them mental health and the social services that they might need that could prevent them from being in the system.
Tell me about, you talk about you didn't have anything. I love the way you put that. You didn't have anything but a business card to offer them, and then you arrested them. I think a lot of times law enforcement officers are maligned. We've talked about a lot on a variety of platforms law enforcement are doing the absolute best that they can do, and you can only do as well as you've been trained to do, frankly. So was that a part of your wanting to launch this platform to help those that maybe are in that law enforcement space to learn to be able to meet the needs of the people that they're serving and to do that job even better than they're maybe doing it today?
Especially for Maurice and I, we were part, so parole agents are part social workers and part law enforcement. We have double duty. We're going to find you a program. We're going to help you get a job. We're going to help you get housing. And at the same time, we will arrest you if you fail to maintain conditions of parole. So it was in that I felt like it's a little late for these social services for some of these people that lived a long lifetime of criminality and just having a lot of problems making poor decisions. So I decided I needed to start in the community as early as I could, as early as I can, and just familiarizing our people, especially the underserved populations, that we do have mental illness and there are services for us.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Kiana and Maurice, do you have anything you want to share as it relates to that law enforcement background, helping to, bolster what you're doing, helping you to do your job even better?
Well, Patrice and I had similar paths, and working together, we both found this vocation of mental health as we were working in a previous profession. Law enforcement was always a career for me, but being a clinician, a mental health provider, is a passion. It's something that's been with me since I was a little child. I've had family tell me, I've had friends tell me, and I didn't know what it was until later on in life. When I pursued this vocation, it just made sense. I retired, went into this full time, and also took on the aspect of an educator, kind of doing similar things with those who are disenfranchised as students and having mental health concerns. So it's kind of a catch-all for the clientele that I work with.
Thank you for sharing that. Kiana, anything you want to add to that before we get into the nuts and bolts of coffee and conversation?
I just wanted to add that so Patrice and Maurice are primarily the clinical piece of it. And so I've kind of, being in law enforcement, I'm still currently in law enforcement. And so our circles and our paths often cross. And so learning what Patrice wanted to do and kind of her mission, I couldn't help but want to get involved. And so I primarily am the program manager, just really putting the pieces together and facilitating the programs and what it kind of looks like. But the clinical piece is then, but is Patrice and Maurice. I really feel passionate, and I also agree with kind of certainly the underserved population in terms of they're resource starved. You think that there's a lot of resources, but when you're talking about the population that she serves, we're talking about the underserved. It's difficult for them to really latch on and kind of, what is the word, take advantage of some of the resources because it doesn't look like what it would look like in different communities. And so I love the unique spin that Coffee and Conversation puts on and in terms of really providing these services, because it's very unique and it's atypical of what most people consider services. So I just couldn't wait to be a part of it.
It is very unique. I love it. As I said at the beginning, coffee and conversation. I wish I had thought of that. It's so unique and it's very descriptive as well. Kiana, if I could, before we get into the slides, you didn't use the word but as you talked about Patrice's and Maurice's role and paired with yours as the administrator, I don't want you for any moment to think that your role isn't as valuable as those clinicians, because frankly, I don't know how you could do. You got a tremendous job there keeping all of those programs and all those balls up in the air. So let's get into the nuts and bolts of Coffee and Conversation. We've got a few slides we want to show everybody, and we'll just start out. Maurice, maybe I'll start out with you describing that first one. That's sure. Coffee and Conversation. Again, embrace the future with Coffee and Conversation. So now we're going to take a look at that next slide. Okay. It's an introduction. You guys are providing direct mental health services designed for the underserved. We've talked about that, and those feeling powerlessness, experiencing trauma, and living from crisis to crisis. Maurice, can you talk about trauma? And I love that phrase, crisis to crisis, really takes you right into the weeds of what so many people are dealing with. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Absolutely. Trauma is a funny word. I think it's one of the most misused words in our vernacular. Um, But trauma can be long term. It could be victimization from trauma. It could be a living experience from trauma, such as an accident. But what we're looking and focusing on are those people, those individuals who are disenfranchised and usually don't have access to services, and just have a hard time navigating the everyday daily routines that you and I sometimes take for granted. And there's a huge need. We have large populations of people who are struggling in these areas. Being part of a mental health process, that's only part and maybe even the tip of the iceberg. What's so important and passionate about coffee and conversation as a foundation, its originator, Patrice Tevis, she has a unique way of approaching this, both from law enforcement and then just being and working around her all these years. Just the passion that she has, it's easy to kind of catch her wave and follow her lead. So it's a very natural process for us to have these types of interventions and provide services for those communities.
I can already tell, thank you, Maurice, that people watching, they're already going to get plugged in. I'm sure we got a website. We're going to be able to drive people to Coffee and Conversation. But let's take a look a little deeper into the information that we've got to share right now.
Sure.
The goal of Coffee and Conversation, to help people create appropriate boundaries for a healthy lifestyle. Kiana, can you talk about boundaries and how important boundaries are in the achievement of a successful life, so to speak?
Certainly, when we speak about boundaries, from the law enforcement perspective, we're going to, certainly with everybody here, we're going to call to call to call. And oftentimes you're dealing with domestic violence, you're dealing with relationship issues, whether it be familial relationships. And a lot of the foundation and the underlying, I think, issue is our boundaries. How do we navigate our personal relationships? How do we navigate our romantic relationships? Allowing people and empowering them to be able to set boundaries and not feel guilty about it, set boundaries that work for their life to help them thrive is important. And so with Coffee and Conversation, it's really about figuring out who is this person in crisis, experiencing whatever that trauma is, but creating boundaries so that they can have less and less crises to be able to thrive.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think,
before we move on, can you speak to my experience suggests, and I don't think I'm alone, you learn to set boundaries. You get better at it the older you get. I remember being a young person. It's not so easy for young people. Can you give young people watching this just a tip or two on how they can start to set those boundaries that'll help make that chaos in their life a little less chaotic?
Well, I think the first thing, and please chime in, Patrice and Maurice, but the first thing I think really is about not feeling guilt, your no being your no. I think oftentimes, certainly in close relationships, you feel a sense of loyalty, that anything that goes is okay because they're my whatever, insert whatever that particular relationship is. And so being allowed to say, even as a young child, I don't want to hug that person. I don't want to feel compelled to do that because it's just what I'm supposed to do. So I think empowering our young people to be okay with their no's, to be okay with trusting their feelings in whatever the relationship, as they navigate relationships, being okay with their decisions when it comes to certain relationships.
And I don't want to piggyback on that. Is young people, our young population, it's important for them to fit in. I mean, that's what the draw is with the technology today. They want to fit in, they want to connect, they want to be a part of something. And it's easy for them, for their boundaries to get blurred in all of the technology that they're exposed to. So sometimes young people don't even get a sense or even know what boundaries are. And that's one way that as we interface with them and using this platform, we can kind of edify them and educate them on the fact that they have rights to have boundaries.
Yeah, it's so powerful. They've got all the rights and every right to set those boundaries in their own lives. And they don't always know that. Young people don't always know that. So I think it behooves us to remind them of that. Really appreciate that, Maurice and Kiana. Let's take a look at the next set of information for you. Healthy relationships. We talked about that. Can you talk about relationships in general? And I think, Kiana, you started out, but I'm going to throw this one to Patrice and see what Patrice might have to say about it. You talked about early on relationships being any one of a number of relationships. It could be a platonic friend. It could be relationships in school. It could be a romantic relationship. Can you talk about the dynamism, so to speak, of relationships and how that can create chaos in and of itself that has to be managed?
Well, the first relationship that we have to have that is healthy is the one we have with ourselves. You can't create boundaries if you don't know who you are. So, and we don't honestly know how to create relationships because sometimes we don't have a roadmap. We didn't have anybody to show us how to create. When we're talking about the targeted population, nobody to show us how to create healthy relationships. What does a healthy man look like, or a healthy woman, or any of that? And so first we have to, coffee and conversation, the name itself was kind of sneak up on people so I can empower them so they can have a conversation with me so that I can talk about mental health, their mental health, and ask about it and they feel okay about it. Because we typically don't believe. We think it's a Caucasian American disease. It's not our problem. We don't understand and all this kind of stuff. So I get people talking so that they can start discovering who they are. Mm-hmm. And when you discover who you are, you start to live in your power. And when you live in your power, you can build those relationships that we're going to need to continue to plan our life. The reason we live from crisis to crisis is because we often don't make plans. You can't make plans. You can't have boundaries if you don't know who you are.
Before we get to the next slide, I should ask this up front. Is Coffee and Conversation a solely virtual platform, or do you have a brick and mortar place where people can go?
We have a brick and mortar office, but since COVID, I've been kind of like a mobile service because I wanted to make sure that these particular clients have access to the services. There's transportation, there's transient living, there's all kinds of, they don't have cell phones, they don't have Zoom and all that, not consistently. So at this point, I kind of like being mobile. I like the freedom of being in a park or a coffee shop, and it often works for the clients.
Isn't it funny how the very things that 4 years ago when COVID hit and we were pivoting, we were struggling, we were trying to figure things out, but we learned a few things, right? Like any crisis, you can learn from, being in the valley of the shadow of death, so to speak. And the fact that we're now virtual, we're able to pull people in from all over the world now in a way that if you were brick and mortar, you're restricted as to who you can serve.
Right.
Absolutely.
Options work.
Yeah. Let's take a look at that next set of information, you guys. Project Source. Tell me about Project Source. Maybe, Kiana, it's your turn if you like. It's a mental health education component of Coffee and Conversation and stresses that every human life should be a journey of transition, growth, change, and becoming better throughout every stage. That's a beautiful phrase there. Talk about it, Kiana.
So Project SOAR is one of my favorites. One of the things we're talking about is boundaries and transition, thriving in every stage, going from surviving to really thriving. Most recently, there's one of the programs in particular that we have partnered with Sojourner Truth, the museum, but with women who are or I don't want to say elderly, but older. They're transitioning into a new stage. And one of the things that we found is planning. What does it look like when Christmases look different because your kids are out the house and you don't have perhaps a spouse? What does it look like with that particular stage and how we thrive in being able to cope with that? So giving people coping skills. And I think Patrice would be really good to speak to this only because she's really in that. But this particular program is really about transitioning. We talk about youth, the different programs, game nights, how do we engage our peers, and how we build relationships and what's normal, how we're building boundaries. This really speaks to, I think, the whole gamut in terms of ages from the youth all the way to elderly and how to thrive, go from surviving to thriving. And Patrice, I think that I want to punt the ball to you only because this is your bread and butter with this one.
Well, we do live our life in stages. We do, every 7 to 10 years, I have studied that we're not the same people necessarily as we continue to move forward. And if we don't plan for those stages, like at 40, you should plan for retirement so that you'll be okay by the time you're 60 or 70. And so some people have a difficult time transitioning. Change is hard for some people. So Project SOAR is about mental health education. It's not about treatment, but it's educating people. And it's overall wellness, socially, mentally, financially. How do we stay on top of the ball? How do we not, because we have a lot of depression and a lot of sickness, how do we refrain from being mentally ill because we're growing old, or because we don't have friends, or because we don't have jobs, or it's a lot, it's everything.
How in the world, I don't know if you can answer it. We've just got a few more minutes left, Patrice. How did you figure that out? I love the way you said we live our lives in stages. And I think I'm just now coming to realize that. So can you talk about how and when you figured that out, and then how you decided to develop that program to address that for those of us who haven't figured that out yet?
Yeah, when you look at, I was talking to my mother about this years ago. At 25, you choose a husband. At 35, you're looking at him like, who is this? Or the other way around. I mean, we're making decisions as young people, and then we're 40 and we're thinking, how the heck did I get here? And so we have to be okay with, it's a new stage. I'm not the same person I was 20 years ago. I'm not the same person I was 30 years ago, and I'm probably going to be different in 10 years. That's a reality. And, we kind of look back and we kind of figure that we would have done some things differently had we known. And so I'm just trying to prepare people for that reality.
And would you agree, before we move on, that's such a strong message for young people? Because I think sometimes, I know when students are being advised academically, and unless they get a really good academic counselor, they sometimes get, thrown into a silo, and they believe, if you decide you're going to do this, you're going to do it for the next 40 years. And we all know that's not true. Many people have career pivots even.
Right.
And I love your example. You're hopelessly in love at 25, and at 35, you not only are saying, who are you? You're also saying, who am I? You're not even the same person.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But when you're really young, you don't really know that. So I just really love that program, and I think a lot of people are going to be able to benefit from it. I appreciate you guys sharing it. Maurice, I haven't forgotten about you. Your turn is up right now, young man. Organic wellness. You're introducing an organic and conversational approach to self-development, creating a comfortable therapeutic alliance and tailored methods of treatment and healing. Can you talk about that, my friend?
Absolutely. Just to piggyback on what was said before leading into this. So I am a academic counselor at a local community college, Sac City Community College. And that's one of the things I really spend time with my students with is their organic wellness. So much so that I also teach a college success course where I specifically talk about some of the various hindrances to their college success. I look at overall, even in my private practice, this idea of holistic wellness. I look at that as looking at a number of areas of our being, of just when we wake up every day, what does our self-efficacy say about us? Are we in a good place? Are we in a bad place? Are we going to be efficient on our job today? Do we have something that we have to deal with? I can speak to a lot of things, so I'll keep it brief, but I come from a history of some trauma and loss of two of my sons. My only two sons preceded me in death and over the years. So I've had to make some decisions about that and how I was going to wake up each day. And so part of just the wellness idea of those who are disenfranchised is you want to, anytime I have an opportunity to come in contact or interface with a group, I want to leave them with a little hope, give them the idea that what they're going through is not abnormal given the circumstance. It's actually normal when you've gone through something traumatic that you're going to not act and be in your best place. But at some point, you'll still get to make the decision whether or not you want to move on to a better, more holistically healthy and well place. And that's what this whole organization is about. Making sure that the people that we come into contact with are equipped to make that decision, that they have help, that there's support. Patrice has really put it in my hands to work with our men, our Black men. As you know, we don't like to talk about our wellness and our feelings. So this is another great opportunity in this platform to get us brothers talking and having real talk and having authentic talk. And so, yeah, I just love every aspect of what's taking place in this foundation.
And I just wanted to add, I didn't want to interrupt, but you mentioned one of the programs, Maurice, about get our brothers talking, and one of the programs that I have a real affinity to is Black Men Are Talking. You
Yes.
know, and it's a podcast that we host, but it's just that, it's getting people in a room, Black men talking about topics that matter, talking about the things that we may not talk about, and just engaging in that. What does it look like? But also a call to action. We don't just, discuss it. What is the next step? When we leave, we want to leave you with something and kind of homework, if you will. What is the next step? So that's one of our programs that I think is very, very beneficial to our men of color.
Kiana, you read my mind. I was going to ask you if we had time to tell me about that podcast. I'm a podcast on my own, and so I'm always curious.
Sorry. I love it.
Sorry. No, that's great. That's great. I was going to ask you about it, so thank you for bringing it up, because I might have forgotten to ask about it. Maurice, before we move on, I've got children of my own. I'd be remiss not to say I'm very sorry for your loss. That touched my heart when you talked about your two sons losing them. So. Got you, man. Got you. Let's take a look at the next slide. This is the one. Somebody mentioned game night. I've been waiting for weeks to ask you about this. Talk about the role of game night in mental health. I'm not so sure of the connection, and I didn't want to Google it. I'm sure there's some information out there. In addition, this is community engagement. You guys provide employment and other social services, and it's wrapped around community resources, and you sponsor a weekly family game night event. So, Patrice, maybe could you talk about game night and the vision for that and how it works?
Anything that makes you feel better about your life is good for your mental health. So nothing doesn't impact your mental health, okay? Nothing doesn't. So our community is starving for healthy engagement. I partner with a man, Timothy Poole, and he does the chest and the skating, and the parents are there. Fathers and daughters are there. I absolutely love it. I love seeing Black men involved. This is good for us. Look, you got me excited now, okay? This is good for us, I love Black men, and I love them stepping into their role, and they get to see that. And the other night, we had almost 100 people at King's Skate Ring. So overall wellness is all of it. All of it.
I am going to come. Can anybody come to one of those game nights?
I want to come too.
Yes, you have to.
I'll give you the information. Yes.
Only because you guys got so excited about it. I'm pretty competitive, so if game night doesn't end well for me, I'm not sure that would be great for my mental health. But we're going to give.
You'll be fine.
You sold me on that. I'm going to give that a shot. That sounds like a lot of fun. Is it a particular night of the week or month?
It's a Thursday night.
Thursday, 6 to 8 p.m. And I think just to piggyback really quickly, when you talk about what does it take to be well, you talk about, a community that is well, it's resources, it's entertainment, it's all these things that's really holistically pouring into your mental health. And so it's really about relationship building. You're there, you're with your family, you're learning how to play chess, you're engaging, you're meeting people. The social aspect is paramount to mental wellness. How do you fit in? How are you included? What is your sense of belonging? And so when you come to this, you meet friends. My daughter attends. You start meeting people that have your same interest, and it's beautiful. I'm telling you, it's beautiful. So,
and that's one of the things that I didn't mean to cut you off there, Kiana, but I talked about COVID earlier. That's one of the things I'm glad we were able to put to rest. That social business thing, because I think a lot of
and I want to say this really.
Right.
All these are therapeutic tools. They're especially for our community, because they're not trying to listen to you talk about do some homework and write up something and I don't know how you feeling right now and all that. That doesn't work with this population.
Right.
The podcasts are therapeutic tools. We're talking about your health. Black men, take care of your health. You've got a serious health crisis in this country, and we love you and we want to see you do okay. That's encouragement. That's support. Nothing doesn't impact your mental health.
Yeah, it's so powerful. So powerful. Thank you so much. Let's take a look. I'm not sure. I think we might have one more slide coming up. I should have been keeping better count. Your approach. Thank you. The importance of mental health education. The changes a process. The value and role of relationships. We talked about that. The personal responsibility and healing. necessity of planning a life that works, need to improve social conditions. The one that jumps out for me is personal responsibility in healing. Kiana, maybe can you talk about the role that we hold personally toward our own healing and maybe toward community healing as well?
Well, I think by just recognizing where we're stuck, what they call the stinking thinking, our thinking, how we think about certain things, how we respond to it. When we're healthy and we're able to build healthy responses to stuff, we can't control what happens to us per se, but we certainly control how we respond to it and how we rebound. And so when we make the choice to want to heal, to want to do better, I think that's the first step in our personal responsibility to thrive and to be well.
Yeah, really appreciate it. I think we're just about out of time. Remember, I told you guys that this time was going to fly by. Let's see what we've got next. That's the approach. What it means to thrive. Self-evaluation is a requirement. Each person's ability to change their life on their terms. Creativity and treatment. Methods for reinventing ourselves. We talked about that one in individualism. Maurice, you want to take one of those and kind of talk about it in about 30 seconds?
Well, real quickly, the self evaluation is a requirement. Every day we wake up, there's self-evaluation going on. There's a decision that we have to make in terms of what kind of person we're going to be. One of the models of my private practice is I enjoy and love and look forward to working with people who want to be better versions of themselves today than they were yesterday. So that can take on any type of role, any type of intervention, any type of treatment. When the person comes willing to say, hey, you know what, I'm here, I'm stuck here, I don't like being in this place, and I want to make that next step. I want to move forward. I want to change something. And it's amazing how sometimes something in their past, something in their previous narrative, we go back to that narrative and find out it wasn't really true. We make that slight adjustment and they're off and running. So it could be something as basic as that. And just like having game night, having the opportunity to interface with other brothers, we offer that opportunity. It happens almost organically.
Yeah, very powerful. Really appreciate you sharing, Maurice. Next up, we may be approaching the end of our time together. I knew it, and I feel like I met three new friends: Patrice Tevis, Kiana Rowe, and Maurice Geddes. It's great to meet you guys. It's a fantastic opportunity to talk about coffee and conversation. Patrice, did we miss anything, or are there any closing thoughts you might want to leave with our viewers today?
I think we're good. My closing thought would be it's never too late to change your life.
Absolutely.
I love it. I love it. And we've got a website for everybody. If you've been intrigued, and I know you have been, I'm going to go to it as soon as we're done. 4, coffeeandconvo.com. That's the number 4, coffeeandconvo.com. We may take this audio and make an audio podcast. So I like to read those so everybody gets it. Thank you so much to the three of you for being with us today. And something tells me we'll be talking to you again soon. And I want to thank you for watching this particular webinar. Again, it's been a part of the Into the Classroom series brought to you by Blue Shield of California's Blue Sky Initiative. You can read all about the stuff that they're doing on their website, and that's bluesky.blueshieldca.com. That's bluesky.blueshieldca.com. My name is Michael P. Coleman. It's been a great pleasure of mine to be with you for this half hour. I hope you got something out of it. Come on back and check out another webinar soon into this Into the Classroom series. Till next time, bye-bye.